are, by nature, explorers. The same curiosity that sends us to the stars at the speed of thought urges us to go there in reality. And whenever we make a great new leap, we elevate humanity, bring people and nations together, usher in new discoveries and new technologies. So remember to look up at the stars and not down at your feet.
So this talk is mainly about visual astronomy because that's what I love. I'm a massive fan of getting a 10-inch Dobsonian out and just viewing everything that I can up in the sky. So I'm going to try and show you and talk to you about what you can actually see. Obviously, I'm going to need to use pictures because I can't show you what I see without someone having to have taken the picture. It doesn't work like that. So most of the pictures hopefully are going to be from people that entered our photo competition throughout the years, and their names are on there as well to show you who actually took them. And I've tried to pick pictures that are more kind of like realistic to what you see as opposed to, you know, all the colors and stuff you can get, but we'll talk about that as we go along. So the thing you have to remember about any visual astronomy is a lot depends on certain factors that are kind of out of your control. So one of these being dark skies, they really help. If you're in a light polluted area like I am, I live in Milton Keynes, it's going to wash out a lot of the fainter objects like galaxies, nebulas and things like that. So if you can drive somewhere that's slightly darker, or there's Scope Nights is an app on there, it actually shows you the areas and the Bortle number of how light polluted it is in the area, so you can see where you can pop along and maybe see it better. There's loads on the actual Google and stuff as well. Just Google dark sky maps, there's tons on there. So yeah, drive somewhere if you can for fainter objects. You don't have to. I've seen things from my back garden like the Ring Nebula and things like that, which are faint, which you will see in this talk. So it just helps. It helps if you go to a darker sky. Another thing is atmosphere. Now we have an atmosphere. Being on Earth, there's an atmosphere. That's what helps us breathe and does all the stuff. So we have jet streams that can get in the way, clouds, humidity, clouds, fog. And did I mention clouds? Yeah. Astronomers hate clouds. Clouds get in the way of all our fun, get out there, but you also like jet streams can get in the way and they can make it kind of all fuzzy. As you're looking at something, it will look wobbly and you think, well, why is that? It's because something's in the way. There might be a lot of humidity in the air, which also does the same. If it's a really hot day, you can see it kind of like on the pavements wobbling about. So nice, cold, dark nights are usually the best, obviously. That leads us to dew. Now, it's the astronomer's bane, because dew loves to settle on the mirrors and the eyepieces and your binoculars and things like that. So it's best to put your scope or gear outside first, leave it out there for 20 minutes, half an hour, maybe an hour, just as long as you can. Make sure it doesn't get stolen or anything, of course. And yeah, that will just help get it to a temperature where the dew won't settle on it. But it does happen. You can get dew shields that go on the front of scopes and binoculars as well. I probably imagine you can get them. And you can also get dew heaters as well. Some people use hair dryers in a very low settings. You don't want to heat it up too quick. You might crack the mirrors. So that's another thing that can get in the way for us. Also, the time of year. So depending on the time of year, some things may not be visible. They might be below the horizon. Some might be up during the day instead of the night. Some might not reach a good height until later on in the month or in the year. So time of year is important for what you're actually going to go out and have a look at. Orbit. Most people don't think about this, but the orbit where we are counts a lot, and also where other things are and where they're orbiting, especially with planets. Because mostly, to be fair, it's with planets, because it's when you're at opposition that it's best to view another planet. So that's when you're kind of pretty much closest to the planet as you can be in your orbit before you start moving away from it again. And it's almost opposite you and the sun. So it means it's slightly brighter than usual. So orbit's quite important. And last but not least, the moon. Love looking at the moon. The moon is awesome, but a fuller moon will again wash things out, just like light pollution. All the reflected light off of the moon will wash out. And it's also, if there's any humidity or clouds that are up in the sky that you maybe can't really see, that will just bring it out even more. So really, you want a dark, moonless, cold night. That's the best thing for you. But if you go out into the garden, you go out and have a look and you look for your telescope and you're not seeing Jupiter or something that well, don't be disheartened, because it might just be one of these factors. It's not your gear, it's probably not you. So don't sit there and go, oh no, my telescope's broken, it's not working, or the mirror this is broken. Just try again another night. I've had it where I've been out looking at Jupiter and it's been horrible. Literally a couple of hours later, when it's got darker and colder, popped out again, crystal clear. And even while you're watching it, sometimes it'll be wobbly and then suddenly it'll go crystal clear and you'll see the best view of it for about 5 minutes, maybe something like that. Then it'll go again. So that's the advice I can give you on that. So let's start by talking about naked eye astronomy. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go out into your garden not wearing any clothes. What it means is you just don't use any gear. Glasses are fine because you obviously need them to see where you're going. But naked eye astronomy means you don't have any gear, no binoculars, no telescopes. You're literally going outside, looking up and seeing what you can see. And as I said, you don't need expensive gear. You can just use your eyes. There's tons that you can see. So let's say it's a nice wintry dark night. You go out into your garden, you look up and you see clouds. Only kidding. This is the picture from my friend Will. Very, very nice. I did steal it from him, so I hope he doesn't mind. Right. It happens to be a perfect night. There are no clouds, there's no thunderstorms, there's nothing going on. So you go outside, you have a look, you see stars. Now, you see all these bright stars, and the brightest stars have names. I believe most of them are Arabic and things like that. So they've all got funny names. You've got Pollux, Betelgeuse, Aldebaran. That's just a few that are up there. I don't think these are up too much tonight. This is just a slide for anything that's going on. The brightest have names. Our ancestors then decided to draw lines between these stars, and they named them constellations. Now, these constellations are based on mythological heroes. There's villains, creatures, there's rabbits, dogs, all sorts of things up there. And they're all pretty much just like some strange stories and things that our ancestors made up. It's what they believed in, maybe the gods. And there's some cool stories up there, which I might go through a few on the when we go through the planetarium bit and tell you about these constellations and what they can actually mean and represent. Astronomers nowadays don't really believe in these gods or these constellations and what they represent, especially unicorns. We don't really think they exist. You never know, there might be some out there. So we use them more now as signposts. So we know that if someone says, in Orion, there's a comet, you generally have a look around Orion. And then you can go to the stars around Orion and find out where it is. So that's what we're really using for. So can anyone see a certain shape within this group of stars here? Now, it's not actually a constellation that I'm going to show, it's an asterism. Now, an asterism is pretty much just another shape within a constellation, so it's just a smaller shape in the sky, really, that our ancestors draw lines to. And this one happens to be the Plough. And there she is, or he is. And the Plough is an asterism, and the reason I want to put this on here is because you can use it as a signpost to find a certain star in the sky, which is quite important, and that's the North Star. So what you do is, I like to call this, they call it the Big Dipper. I like to call it the saucepan, only because I can describe to you what to do. So you look up the handle, go along the handle, down into the saucepan, and then up those last two stars, go straight ahead in the line, and it points you to Polaris. Now, Polaris is important because it's the North Star. It's not the brightest star. It just doesn't move in the sky. So it stays there because it's perfectly on axis to Earth's axis. So as we spin around, it stays completely still in the sky. Now, if we have a look, I've done a little video here just to represent and show you. You can see Polaris there in the middle. All the other stars and constellations all moving around. So that's why throughout a night, some constellations may set and some may rise. So it might be better to wait till later on, till they come up. And then you've got the sunrise. So that's why things change over, and they also change over the seasons as well and things like that. So that's how you can find Polaris. Now, I like to say that the British are good sailors, only because we're in the UK. Let's say the UK, we're really good sailors because, one, we live on an island, and two, which means we had to sail somewhere to get anywhere, you've got this star which points north. If you go into the southern hemisphere, they've got a cross. It's like 4 stars, but that moves around, so it might confuse them a bit. We've got this perfect star right there facing north, so we could navigate using it. So that might be one of the good reasons why the northern hemisphere are really good sailors, and we know what we're doing and where we're going generally. So what else have we got? star trails. Now, if you actually get your phone and you can get something called Nightcap Pro, and you can pop it on a bench or on your car bonnet, you can do it with cameras as well. Just leave the exposure running, leave it running, or take pictures over time. And you can actually get the star trails. You're getting the movement of the Earth as it's turning around in these stars as they go. So you can get a really cool effect like this. Now, I've tried it before. It's not easy because you're trying to do this for a few hours to get the stars to move and look really cool. But you've also got planes flying through, helicopters, satellites, all sorts of things like this, maybe birds and things. So it can get in the way sometimes, but it's a really cool effect and actually shows you how the Earth's moving around Polaris. So it's pretty good. So if we go back to the plow now, and I'm going to talk about the second star up from the handle, because there's something else cool here that you can look at. And that is this star here. Now, it's not actually one star, it's two. And in the old days, the Roman days, they used to use it as an eye test. So nowadays we tend to look at number plates and things like that. They didn't really have number plates back then. So they used to use this as an eye test for the soldiers in the military. So they used to look up there and ask them, how many stars can you see? I believe they used to do it with the Seven Sisters as well. I think the Greeks and that might have done that. So they said, oh yeah, I can only see one. That means you haven't got good eyesight and you're going to be a soldier at the front getting hurt and getting beaten up. If you could see two, then it meant you have good eyesight and you're going to be a Roman archer. So you'll sit at the back having a sip of tea, firing arrows over nice and safe. So if anyone ever asks you how many stars can you see, it's always two. I can see two stars there. So that's something you can go out and try tonight. See if you can see the two stars there for the Roman eye test. Now, stars are cool. You can see them all up in the sky. Here's a couple of pictures. So there's another famous double star there. That's what they're called when there's two together. You get doubles, you get double doubles, double double doubles. And they're also known as binaries and things like that. So I believe the one on the left is Vega, nice blue, really bright star. We'll be looking at that a little bit later. And then on the right, that's the head of the swan. So it's Alberio, as I like to call it. And that's really nice because you've got a yellow and a blue. You might not be able to make it out of your eyes, but it's just something that you can look at and have a peek at. Now, going from there, we did hit on this subject, satellites. Now, there are tons and tons and tons of satellites up in orbit at the moment. And you can see them just as they go through, as the sun glints off them, you can see them across the sky. Now, as I speak, we'll do a little video here. So if you look where the red arrow is, you'll see a very small white dot come out from there and start flying across the sky. It will start brightening as it goes across the sky. Now, this is a satellite. Now, you'll see loads of these going across everywhere, especially with Starlink at the moment, because Elon Musk is putting like trains of them all up there to do like a global web sort of thing. So you might see like 30, 40, 50 all go across together, and then they slowly separate out and apparently disappear so we can't see them. But there's all sorts up there. You've got them for weather, GPS, so when you're using your sat nav and things like that, it's using satellites. And as I said, Starlink is trying to make a web of all sorts of things. There's also junk up there, so there's boosters from rockets and bits and bobs. And they're really cool to see. You see it flying through the sky like that. That's quite cool. I quite like that. But again, they are the bane of astrophotographers, because if you're taking a picture, one of these flies through, it ruins it. But it's something cool that you can go out in your garden and have a peek at. And we've also got something even bigger up in the sky. So we've got the International Space Station. We've got a space station flying around our planet in orbit. That's like science fiction. It's brilliant. So it's like sci-fi to me as a kid. I'm like, wow, that's mad. There's a space station and I can see it. You can actually see it flying across the sky. It's really bright. It depends on the time of year or month, because it moves around differently. It takes about 90 minutes, I believe, to go around in orbit, and it changes depending where we are. But you can see it. Now, I was lucky once. I went out into my garden, heard it was coming across the sky. I got my phone. This was a few years ago. Got my iPhone. I strapped it to my manual telescope, which means I had to move it around with my hand. I put elastic bands on it, bits of wood, put it all up against the eyepiece and hit record in the hope that I could get a picture of the International Space Station. Never done it before, didn't have a clue what I was doing. Press record, and I just looked through the finder scope, which is the little one on the top, and tried to get the International Space Station as it went through that several times, hoping that I got a video. Now, the video is hilarious because it's literally a spot that flies around everywhere, but I did manage to freeze frame it, and I got a picture of the International Space Station. Yeah, it looks rubbish, I know, but that's an iPhone. through a telescope, and that's a space station. And I managed to get a picture. I think that's cool. So I'm happy with that, even though, you know, it's not the greatest and you could probably do better now, but just goes to show the things you can do. Now, there is many sort of phenomena in the sky that you can see, from sort of zodiacal lights, which they've now found out they think is like Mars dust, which is lit up by the sun, to what these are, noctilucent clouds. Now, noctilucent clouds you can see here, they're quite rare. I've seen 2, I think, in the time that I've done it, in about 6 years. And they're kind of ice crystals in the atmosphere that are being lit up from the sun rising or setting, and they're being lit up from below. So they think that they might be crystals and dust and stuff from meteors that have been burning up in the atmosphere. So they think they might be what that is, almost like the dust and all the, you know, gas that's left over from that. I don't think they really know at the moment, but that's what they think there is. So that's just using your eyes. So there's tons and tons you can see just using your eyes. So if we just look at a normal night, like say tonight, we look there, you've got the moon. The moon is always cool to look at. You get crescents, different phases. You can see all the stuff. You can see it each night move position. So you can watch the moon actually move as it gets its phases up and down. You've got planets. So just above it, Mars. The planets were known as wandering stars in the olden days. Our ancestors saw these and thought they were stars that wandered strangely across the sky. And you can see them move as well. They will take probably a few more months rather than days compared to the moon, but you can see that they change positions each month. You've got huge stars like Betelgeuse, which is, I call it Betelgeuse, I think it's Betelgeuse, but I like the film. Huge, massive red supergiant star that's going to explode at any point into a supernova. It's going to be within the next million years. So in sort of space-time terms, that's quite soon. So you never know. It did have a moment of dimming and everyone thought it was going to blow up a few months ago or last year. It didn't happen yet. You've got Orion's belt. That's always a cool thing. Different shapes of stars in the sky. You've also got over to the right, you've got the Pleiades there, which is a really nice blue cluster of stars that we'll be looking at later. So you've got all these things that you can see just using your eyes. Now, say you've done that, you've had a look out, you've seen all these things with your eyes, and you think, right, I want to take the next step. You don't need a telescope. Grab some binoculars. Any binoculars you've got lying around at home will help, but the best we say, try getting 10 by 50. There's a whole range out there of 10 by 50 binoculars that are really good. We use opticrons, but the Celestrons are great. Orion ones, they all pretty much do the same job. They've got good optics. This just gives you a rough picture of how big the moon will be, so that it won't look that much bigger. You can see more detail on it, but it's not really about the size and the zooming in. It's more about how much light they can let in. So with these, you get a bigger field of view than a telescope, and you get 2 lots of, you know, light going into both eyes. You get to use both eyes. So it really brings out clusters of stars and things like that, and it's really cool. So the first thing that you might want to have a look for is the Milky Way. Now, at the moment, it depends on time of year. It can be really low in the sky, like a little arch. And then as it gets later in the year, it will actually almost go right across the sky, arching its way across. That's the best time to see it. So I believe later in the year will be better. So September, October, maybe something like that. Go out in the summer and have a look. And you get your binoculars up, you'll look along, and suddenly you'll go from seeing a few stars to hundreds of stars. And that's when you know you kind of hit the Milky Way, this band, this arm of our galaxy that's going across the sky. Now, the Milky Way has about 200 to 400 billion stars. That's quite a, 200 to 400 billion, just give or take 1 or 2, eh? And I like these pictures because they show you kind of like, especially the left one, that's kind of like what you see. You can't really see all the colors and everything coming through, but you can see this sort of like gassy band of stars and dark, dust lanes and things across the sky. And that's something really, really cool to see. You actually think you're seeing part of your galaxy up in the sky. So you can see the Milky Way. You can also see, this is the 7 sisters that I spoke about. So this is called the Pleiades or 7 sisters. And this is an open cluster. So it's an open cluster of stars. These are bright, blue, burning baby sort of stars just been born. You can see from the picture, there's a little bit of gas around them, which is like the nebula that they were born from, still there. They haven't blown all the gas away yet. So they're kind of lighting it up. And these look amazing for a pair of binoculars. If you've got 20 by 80 ones, the bigger pair, they are going to be heavy. So you'll probably need a tripod. That's why it's got the big metal bits. It screws onto a tripod. These are stunning. I've looked at it myself. They're really, really cool. So that's something you can see. Going from open, you've then got a bit of both. So you can see now there's even more stars here. So this is like the Milky Way area. So you can see how many more stars there are looking across the Milky Way itself. Now on the left there, you've got all those blue stars in a clump. That's an open cluster. And to the right, you've got like a clump of them. And that's what's known as a globular cluster. So this is in Gemini and it's by his foot. And hopefully I'll show you this later on when we do the actual planetarium bit and sky guide. So the open one is all bright, you know, nice new burning stars, baby stars. And they're the older ones in this globular cluster. And this is what they can look like. One of the good ones is in Hercules. I believe that's the one on the left. The Hercules globular cluster is really cool. It's really big, and there's hundreds of thousands of stars in there. And these are really old stars. They're really old stars. They say they lack the heavy elements that the younger stars have now. And there's clumps of these all around the galaxy, and they kind of orbit around us from what I've heard. So I didn't even know these even existed when I first started looking at the sky. So there's these clumps of stars all over the place, and you can see them with binoculars, quite cool. So moving on, there is a number 37 written in the stars. Now this is, I spoke about the star Betelgeuse, just above Betelgeuse in Orion, around about his elbow, I'd say, maybe where he's holding his club, because he's a hunter. There's this number 37, and you can see it really cool with binoculars. And no one really knows what it is. So I sit there and think, well, it's either the meaning of life, if anyone's a fan of a certain program or film, or because it's just above this star Betelgeuse that's about to explode at any time, maybe this is a countdown for it. So if it goes down to 36, I'll let you know, and then we can work out when it's going to blow up. But that's just something really mad that you can see in the sky. Now, another cluster I really like is this one, and this is in Cancer the Crab, so we'll see that later on. It's an X almost, and right in the middle is the Beehive cluster. And I like this one because you've got all the colours of the stars there. So you've got the blue and white young stars, like the babies and the kids running around full of energy. You've got the yellow stars, a bit like me, middle-aged now, settling down, quite happy with myself and where I am. Then you've got these sort of red and orange dark stars, which are the older ones. Middle-age spreads happen. They started getting a bit bigger. And it just shows you all the ages of the stars. So the different colours pretty much denote the ages of all the stars. It's really, really good to see. Now, I've done a little thing just to kind of show you the sorts of maybe sizes of what you're going to see when you look through binoculars. And this is only my own sort of visual, you know, interpretation and sort of look at it from what I kind of remember seeing. So looking for a pair of binoculars, maybe 10 by 50 to 20 by 80s, you're going to get to see Jupiter and its moons. It will be small, but you can still see it there. You will be able to make out Jupiter's details with 10 by 50s because I've done it and I have seen the little gas lines. Not sure if you'll see the red spot, but you might be able to if you've got really good eyes and a steady hand. You can see Saturn and its rings. The Orion Nebula you can see with them. You can see it kind of like that. I mean, these may not look impressive, but that's because they're a picture that I took using either my iPhone or, you know, something probably worse. But it just shows you that kind of like, you're not going to see all these massive, really cool colors, but you can still see them. You can still see all these stars and this nebula, and it will be better through the binoculars than these pictures. It always is. You can't beat actually looking and seeing, not unless you use Photoshop, of course, because that brings out everything and makes it look really cool. So these are all the sorts of things you can see all over the sky. So there's tons of clusters of stars. There's all nebulas and things that you can find, look in the planets, and that's just binoculars. So now take a deep breath because it's time to get serious. Now we're moving on to telescopes. Now there is a whole minefield of scopes out there. I'm not really going to go into it on this talk because it's more about just what you can see in the sky. So this is a range that I've used and pictures I've taken just using my phone and 2 different eyepieces, just to give you an idea of the, you know, how much you can zoom in and what you can see. Now we always recommend Dobsonians, which are the big white ones on the stands, because they're cheaper. They're made of wood and a big metal tube, and they're mirrors. So they're cheaper. They're really good for beginners, but there are so many more out there. Refractors are awesome as well. So you need to find the right scope for you. But you don't need a huge scope. I started with a £50, that little top left one, Heritage Tabletop Dobsonian, and I saw loads with it. Then I got some binoculars. Then I moved up to a 10-inch Dobsonian because I went a bit mad. But yeah, you can see tons of stuff up there. So with telescopes, you also need eyepieces. So eyepieces are the bits that slot in, which kind of zoom in. So 25 mil is a nice one to start with, or 26 it says on here. You put that in, gives you a nice field of view, so you can find the object you're looking for, take out the 26, maybe put in a 15, you're zooming in a bit more, but you're losing your field of view. And then it's not always best to zoom in, because sometimes it can be better around about a 10 mil rather than an 8, because then it starts blurring, because maybe it's going past the restrictions of your scope and things like that. So as you put eyepieces in and out and zoom in and out, this is the sort of thing you're going to see. So I decided to take a picture of the moon and take another picture as I zoomed in with each eyepiece, see how much I can go, to show you how telescopes aren't always the best, because although you can zoom in a lot, you lose a lot of field of view that binoculars give you. So binoculars are definitely like the right-hand man for telescopes, or the wingman. So you've got that Copernicus little crater there. So if we zoom in a little bit, and then we zoom in again. So say you had the 25 in, go for a 20, maybe an 18. These are all done by my iPhone, by the way, so any of you guys can do it really easily. And maybe go, 15, a bit more, go for a 10, try an 8. There we go. So now you can see there, we've lost a lot of the moon because we zoomed in a lot. So that is now our field of view, and you can see the edge of the eyepiece there where it stops. And then maybe one more, that's the closest. So that's with a 10-inch Dobsonian, but you don't need one like that. You can get really nice ones with normal telescopes, smaller ones, 6 inches, things like that. Loads to see. But that's just to show you how telescopes work and zoom in. So that's the boring bit out of the way. So what can you see with telescopes apart from the moon, of course? Nebulas. Now, this is the Orion Nebula. Now, I've tried to do a little box at the top left to kind of try and show you maybe the size that you'll see through your telescope. Of course, it does depend on the telescope, but it's just a rough sort of like generic idea for you to get, a visual representation. You're not going to see all these colors. I'm really sorry to say that. The cameras bring out so much color. It's amazing. All these elements swirling around in this nebula. And you can see all the bright stars inside of it are like baby stars being born, because this is a star nursery. So you can see like a star nursery actually lighting up all the gas that created them. So this is the Orion Nebula, just below Orion's belt. And it's one of the best ones, which is why you always get nice pictures of it. And it's quite an easy one for you to find and see. Now, you'll see a bit of gas around. You'll see the stars. You probably won't see the little nebula called the Running Man above it, which looks like the gas looks like a little man running or something. But you can see the place where stars are being born just using a telescope in your garden. I've done it. So that's how cool is that? Now, going from there, we've got the opposite. Now, this is the dumbbell, and then you've got the ring, which is the top right. And top left is just a smaller version dumbbell, just to show you they're the sort of sizes you're going to see. Now, the dumbbell and the ring is pretty much the same thing. You're just looking at it at a different angle. You're looking at it head on with the ring and from the side with the dumbbell. And this is where a star has died. So it's a star like our sun. And when it's got to the end of its life, it's expanded, taken out Mercury, Venus, Earth, possibly Mars, and then it's gone back in on itself, and its last sort of gasp, it's just gone, ugh, and thrown all its gas out into space. And this is what you see. So this might be what our sun will look like. So you've got the ring nebula, it's like a little polo mint floating in space, and then you've got the dumbbell. So this is the death of a star. So you've seen the birth of stars, and now you're seeing the death of stars up in space. Again, you may see a bit of green. I've seen a bit of color. You won't see a lot of it. But you can see this. Again, even in my Milton Keynes, I've managed to find the ring nebula and see it in my garden here. So it's really, really cool. This is another death of a star. But this time, it's actually exploded. So this was seen, I believe, by Chinese astronomers in sort of the 1600s. And they called it the guest star, because there was a really bright star suddenly appeared in the sky, and they could see it during the day. We have now looked back, hundreds of years later using telescopes and found it was actually a supernova. So it's a star exploding, not just throwing its gas out like our star. It was big enough to, explode. And this is what is left. It's called the Crab Nebula. So all the heavy elements and stuff that are being thrown out are all here. And combining all of these two together is kind of what gives us all the heavy elements we've got today. Like, you know, the iron in our blood and stuff like that all came from stars. Most of us came from stars, or almost all of us came from stars. So when the stars explode, they throw stuff out. And it might sound sad, but really they're throwing out new building blocks for life and planets and things like that. So it's recycling itself all the time. So that's stars and how they can explode and what you can see. So you can see these stars that have exploded or just died, sadly. Moving on from there, we've got galaxies. Now, galaxies are cool. Galaxies are what I really wanted to see. When I first got my telescope, that 10-inch Dobsonian, I was like, oh man, I just want to see another galaxy outside of ours. How mental would that be? This galaxy full of other stars and black holes and life and who knows what else. These were the first two I ever saw. Now, they looked more like the top left. Couldn't really make out too much detail of the spiral arms and that. And it's called Bode's and Cigar. The Cigar one kind of says it itself. It's the long, thin one, looks like a cigar. How cool do they look? Another galaxy. And that was the first one I saw. I saw two smudges. I saw one smudge and it was the Bodes. And I was like, oh, what's that? And as I moved a little bit, I caught the other one. I didn't know what they were. So I went on an app on my phone and looked up Stellarium, which I'll show you in a minute. It's the software we're going to use to have a look around the sky. And I worked out it was these two. And I was like, oh, the first galaxy I ever saw, and I found two. Didn't see much detail. They were like fuzzies. They call them white fuzzies. But later on, when I went to Charmouth and had a look in a darker sky, you can actually see some of the dust lanes and the spiral arms. Really, really good. So from these two, moving on to the favorite. Now, I didn't choose a massive blown up picture of Andromeda here because I wanted to kind of show you what you'll see through a telescope. So it's really bright. It's got really bright core, so it does wash a lot of the galaxy itself out. So you don't actually get to see a lot of detail. But if you do go to a dark sky, you'll see something like this. So you see this big fuzz. You might see some dust lanes all around there. It's one of the biggest galaxies and the closest to us. If you look to the bottom right, there's another fuzz there. That's another galaxy, a dwarf one. And there's another tiny little one just to the top left of it, really close. You might just make that out. So you're getting 3 for 1 here. So when you see the Andromeda galaxy, you're actually getting 3 galaxies. Now, these two dwarf galaxies are kind of orbiting Andromeda, and they're being pulled in by its gravity, and they're going to merge with it and become part of this galaxy. As are we. In space, everything is moving away, but the Andromeda galaxy and the Milky Way are actually coming towards each other, because one day they're going to merge together. It's going to be billions of years, so don't worry about it. And it's going to create like a super galaxy. There might be a few stars thrown out and things like that, but generally there won't be any collisions from what they're telling us. And it's just going to create this huge super galaxy. So while you're sat there in your garden looking at this galaxy, one day you are going to be inside that galaxy. You're going to be a part of that galaxy. And I just love that. I think it's awesome. Now, coming from one galaxy onto many. Now, in Virgo, there's what's called like the Virgo supercluster. And it's kind of like a cluster of galaxies that we're a part of, and they're all kind of like there together. And you can see this all in Virgo, which I'll have a look in a bit. So you've got all these galaxies here. There's loads of them all about. You might need a bigger telescope to see them, but you can see there. I know it's not the best sort of like, you know, high resolution sort of picture, but I love it because you can see, like, see how many you can count. There's 2 more on the bottom right. They're all over there. And I think it's amazing. It just shows you how many you can get. So thank you, Neil, for that one. So apart from galaxies, what other things have we got that we can see in the sky? Comets. Now, if you were around, probably around this time last year, there's a really good comet in the sky. So a comet is kind of almost like a massive snowball, a clump of ice flying through space. And as it gets nearer the sun, it heats up and it leaves a tail. Generally, it can leave 2. One on where it's been heated from and one on the direction it's traveling. Now, this was NEO-wise, and it was awesome. I've never seen a comet by eye like this. It was stunning. And this is my first ever picture. And Will Cheng helped me with this. He gave me all the settings for my camera. And I went out. It's my first ever go with my camera. And I managed to get this picture. I love it. So a comet has a huge tail coming from it. So you can see them going along. If you see them through a telescope or binoculars, they generally look like a big round sort of green fuzz maybe, and then move each night across the sky. So that's when you know you've got a comet. It might have a tail if you're lucky. Now, from these comets come this. So we have meteors, and there's been quite a few reported lately, even though there wasn't really anything going on in the sky. There was no meteor showers that time, but there's been quite a lot of fireballs and things reported. So have a look up. It's always going on. This is a meteor shower. Now, meteor showers are generally when the Earth goes through one of the tails or dust lanes of these comets, and a couple of asteroids as well do it as well. So we can kind of sit there and go, right, we know one happens in August, we know one happens in December, we know another big one happens in January, and there's little ones throughout the year. So we can kind of sit there and go, right, around this time, we've got a higher chance of seeing little bits of dust and rock burning up in our atmosphere. That being said, they're not always, well, they weren't in the olden days when you got the ISS up there, not always bits of rock and dust. I got taught by my wife, apparently, and I did ask our NASA lady if it was true, and I think it was. Astronauts on the International Space Station have to go to the toilet. And when they did in the old days, it got sort of vacuumed up and shot into space. The nearest thing to the International Space Station is us. So that bag of poo went flying down, orbited us, and then burnt up in our atmosphere, creating a shooting star. So not all shooting stars were bits of comet or asteroids. It might have been some astronaut poop. Luckily, nowadays, they don't do it anymore. They actually recycle something like 80 or 90% of their stuff. So I'm not sure what's more disgusting, because, you know, yesterday's coffee was the day before's, yeah. Or should we have it burn up in the atmosphere? Who knows? So that's meteors and comets and things like that. So I did manage to get a picture. That's the first picture I ever got of one shooting across the sky. It might not look much. It's just a light streaking across the sky, but that's a bit of space dust burning up in our atmosphere. I went to Eastbourne and sat on the edge of a cliff, not literally, but I laid down, got my camera out, and I was meant to have this machine that you connect to your camera, you press the button, and it will automatically take a picture of the sky, kind of like every 5 seconds. It didn't work. So I had to link my phone to it, and I had to lay on the floor, pressing the hit button 300 times over about 2 or 3 hours, one by one, and my thumb ached in the morning. But I got a picture of a meteor, right? So it was well worth it, well worth it. Thumb's recovered now, so we're okay. So that's everything from there. Now that's more than enough, I think, for people to go out and have a look at and, you know, see things. Now let's have a look now, because we've been sitting there looking up at space. What do we look like looking down? So this is a cool little video that I got, and I just added some words for you. So this is now the International Space Station flying across the Earth, because we never get to look at our own planet and see how amazing it is. All those yellow lights you're seeing, they're all the towns and cities and roads and all that light pollution that we hate being thrown up. So if aliens ever go past, they're definitely going to spot us. All the blue flashes you're seeing, that's actually lightning from space. So you can see lightning in all the clouds. Now the sun's rising, solar panels will turn towards it. Now that green line that you're seeing is like our ozone layer, that's our atmosphere, that's where space starts. That is what looks after us. Keeps us with oxygen, no, it keeps us from floating off into space. No, that's really gravity. But then sometimes the sun hits it. When the sun throws particles and photons out into space and flares, it hits the Earth and then lights up, it kind of ionizes, and that creates the aurora, which my friend Will loves so much. And you can see why. So that's our atmosphere looking after us, protecting us from space, which is deadly. Now, the International Space Station orbits at around 17,000 miles per hour, and it takes about 92 minutes to do one orbit. So if you see it in a night, 92 minutes later, roughly, it should come back.
Yeah.